The Lord of the Rings franchise is beloved by many and has seen many different licensed video games over the years. In 2003, a studio named Inevitable Entertainment released a game based on Tolkien's 1937 novel, The Hobbit. It was released on GameCube, PlayStation 2, Xbox, and PC. In The Hobbit, you play as Bilbo Baggins, a hobbit who sets off on a grand adventure, exploring different places filled with fantasy creatures. But to a lot of people's surprise, the game is actually a 3D platformer, with tricky jumps, puzzles, collectibles, and combat. But the game also came with quite a few bugs, and some people were critical of its cartoony art style. Some would remember The Hobbit fondly as a game of their childhood, and some would quickly forget about it. But we're not here to talk about them today. We're here to talk about the dedicated community that still plays The Hobbit to this day. The people that saw the game's flaws as opportunities. The people that broke the game apart, optimized it, and played it for countless hours. You'll be surprised to see how far this small community has pushed this relatively overlooked game, all with a single goal: to beat the game as fast as possible. This is the history of the Hobbit speedruns.
No way! No way!
Best discovery I ever made. Like ever.
Over a minute time save, and it's still very beatable.
Okay, yeah. That was awesome.
What the fuck?
We in there, guys, we in there.
I always thought Hobbit was a really good contender for being a popular speedrun game.
And I watched the whole thing through and I'm like, this is actually insane.
Over time, I realized that these factors are what actually molded The Hobbit into an amazing speed game.
Every new game I learned was like reaching out to new people and becoming part of a new community.
In The Hobbit, you play through 12 different levels, most named after chapters in the book. In these levels, you complete various quests and challenges, and on the way you get different upgrades to your attacks and health. Bilbo can long jump and combine slash attacks with slopes and jumps to gain extra speed, making for surprisingly deep movement. All levels are separated by loading screens, making completely skipping one impossible. So the question became, how to beat every single level as fast as possible. But The Hobbit wasn't very well received at launch, and it didn't seem like anyone was actually interested in speedrunning the game. That was until 4 years after launch, when in August 2007, someone going by the username PyroTHPS uploaded what is believed to be the first glitch showcase of the game ever. Pyro discovered that you could go out of bounds near the end of the level Roast Mutton, where you would normally sneak past trolls. From there, he looped back to an area behind the start of the level, where he found an alternate end trigger, completing the level without doing the stealth section. A large discovery, and it set the tone for many discoveries to come. However, it would take another 3 years until in February 2011, another discovery was documented for the game. Someone named Kazooie started uploading speedrun routes for various levels in the game, starting with a route for the second level, named An Unexpected Party. Kazooie found and abused a trick that would later be called a slope boost to get out of bounds, then went all the way around the level and walked to the final house, ending the level without completing any of the required tasks. The slope boost was a huge discovery. By jumping and performing a well-timed jump attack just before touching slopes with a certain steepness, Bilbo would boost upward against the slope. This can send him large distances depending on the size and steepness of the slope, and it opened many opportunities to skip large parts of levels. As a matter of fact, Kazooie found out that you could use a slope boost pretty soon after starting in Roast Mutton to get out of bounds much earlier, and quickly reach the end trigger that Pyro had found. Kazooie also discovered a slope boost in Trollhole. Normally you beat Trollhole by climbing a large mountain, but Kazooie found out that you could slope boost out of bounds from a tricky long jump soon after starting the level. From here, he traveled back to the area behind the start of the level, where just like Roast Mutton, there was an alternate end trigger, skipping almost the whole level. The slope boost was a huge find, but if you missed it, you had to wait 10 seconds before the game let you jump attack again. Then over the next year, someone named Rockmock steadily started uploading speedrun strats and routes for the game, starting with a skip for a gear collection section in Overhill and Underhill, a skip which was later fittingly called Bean Island Jump. Later that year, he had even uploaded speedrun routes for Riddles in the Dark and Flies and Spiders, with the Flies and Spiders route being especially impressive because it used many out-of-bounds strategies. But then, progress on routing slowed down, with nobody ever having completed a full speedrun. That was until the next new face appeared. It was someone known as Aceprune, someone who would soon become a legend in the Hobbit speedrunning history. Seemingly out of nowhere, on February 13th, 2013, Aceprune posted a complex yet fast route for the Cloud's Burst, the 12th and final level of the game. And the day after that, he posted a route for the level Inside Information, as well as one for the Gathering of the Clouds. Aceprune was showing very creative routing, and it was clear he had a great understanding of the game's mechanics. His routes featured precise hits on invisible load triggers, and showed off tricks that had never been seen before. Eventually in March, he uploaded an improved Flies and Spiders route, and in July, he found a much faster and easier route in an unexpected party. And with that, Aceprune was ready to do what nobody had attempted before him. Aceprune was prepared for every single one of the 12 levels in the game. On July 11th, 2013, Aceprune completed the first ever full game speedrun of The Hobbit on Nintendo GameCube. Aceprune was moving around by using long jumps down slopes and by using a slash, then a jump everywhere else, which was fittingly named a slash jump. Slash jumping was faster than walking, but not faster than long jumping, yet slash jumps were used often. This was because long jumping to ground that was above or at the same height of Bilbo would put him in a lengthy slide animation, so Aceprune generally only used long jumps when going downwards. Aceprune's run was starting quite strong, and he performed his An Unexpected Party route well. Unfortunately, he had quite a sloppy roast mutton because of missing the slope boost and needing to wait for his jump attack to recharge multiple times. But that was made up for by an excellent troll hole slope boost that he hit first try, which was generally considered even harder than roast mutton. Unfortunately, Aceprune died in Overhill and Underhill by falling down during the Stone Giants section. But he performed the rest of the level quite well, only having a little bit of trouble with the slope boost right at the end. In Riddles in the Dark, Aceprune died pretty far into the level, but luckily he had saved not too long before, which led to a generally solid time in this level. Aceprune had now completed half of the game's 12 levels in under 20 minutes, but the hard parts were yet to come. Aceprune performed the level Flies and Spiders very well, only having some trouble with a tricky slope boost right at the end. This level actually has a set of 3 big spiders as a boss fight at the end. This was a notoriously hard fight in a speedrun, because almost all of the collectibles that level you up are avoided, meaning Bilbo was much weaker than usual. Aceprune did play it safe by using various save points within this section, but didn't end up needing any of them. Barrels Out of Bond didn't feature any notable skips, and Aceprune managed to perform it well. 2/3 of the levels were completed in just over 40 minutes. Then, A Warm Welcome was looking really good, despite having some safety saves. However, as luck would have it, and Aceprune decided to skip a save after a long puzzle section, this happened. Dying this far into the basement hurts, but this being the first ever run of the game, it's no surprise there would be mistakes. Unfortunately, this negative momentum carried over into Inside Information, where Aceprune died in the section where you avoid Smaug the Dragon's fire breath. Then before even getting back to the Smaug section, he died again by falling during some chandelier parkour. But finally, on Aceprune's 3rd attempt around the level, he completed it without any more mistakes. Next up, The Gathering of the Clouds, the longest level in the speedrun with a complex route. There were numerous potential time saves that could be pointed out, but most notable was a very tight slope boost in the corridor leading up to the water puzzle room. Acebrune was stuck on this slope boost for 3.5 minutes, enough to put any runner on severe tilt, but Acebrune persevered and cleared the Gathering of the Clouds. Now loading into the final level, the Clouds Burst. Despite his mistakes before, Acebrune performed his already complex route here extremely well. Acebrune's final time was 1 hour, 35 minutes, and 55 seconds. The run was far from perfect, but what he had shown was the potential of the Hobbit speedruns, the flashy tricks, deep routing, and interesting movement. When progress on routing the game had slowed, Acebrune was the one who pulled through and finished it. And so, Acebrune was the one to kick off the Hobbit speedruns. Thanks to Acebrune's efforts, there was renewed attention for the Hobbit. Just a day after completing his first run, Acebrune improved his Gathering of the Clouds route by finding a new skip. By boosting up the shoulder of a Durin statue and doing some very tricky parkour, he could skip the lengthy block puzzle in the main hall, a very difficult but worthwhile skip. Rockmox, who had now been inactive for a year, went on to search for his own new skips and route improvements alongside Acebrune, and after just a single day, Rockmox found a method of skipping Dreamworld, the first level in the game. Instead of fighting a set of enemies which lowered a ladder, he did a tricky jump, curving around a broken wall to slope boost up it at just the right height, which would hit the end trigger without having to lower the ladder first. But the momentum didn't stop here. The next day, Acebrune revisited his theoretical A Warm Welcome sequence break he had posted earlier that year. He was able to go out of bounds and do a precise jump in the void, where all the interiors of the different buildings in the level are loaded in advance. Then just before hitting the ground, Acebrune fell right past a save point, and by saving the moment before he hit the ground, he was able to respawn back down there. And there, you could collect the black arrow, which normally required you to complete a set of lengthy puzzles. The only issue was that once he got down here using this skip, there was no way to do the remaining quests and to deliver the black arrow, but Acebrune had an ace up his sleeve. 2 years before this, when Kazooie first started routing the Hobbit, Kazooie had uploaded a video showcasing some of the glitches he had found. One of the things he showed was Bilbo clipping into a wall and getting stuck in a falling animation. Then after falling for several seconds, he suddenly warped. This turned out to be a failsave mechanism, which would teleport Bilbo if he was found to be stuck. But how did the game choose where to warp? Well, as it turns out, the developers figured that if Bilbo was able to touch the ground for 2 consecutive seconds, that spot was probably safe, and the game would remember that position and warp Bilbo back there in the event he got stuck. This warping mechanism, later called clip warping, could be used to get back out of the basement with the black arrow. Acebrune figured out that Bilbo's safe position would be reset to the start of the level after death, so after jumping down to the save and respawning, he could continue jumping, so he never touched the ground for 2 consecutive seconds. Then, he grabbed the black arrow and clipped into a wall to get Bilbo stuck. His safe spot was never updated because of the jumping, so he warped right back to the beginning of the level, from where he could complete the rest of the quests while completely skipping the puzzles leading up to the black arrow. This skip was mind-blowing. It was extremely creative and fast, potentially saving upwards of 7 whole minutes. While all these skips were being found, someone else had taken an interest in speedrunning The Hobbit. He was an established speedrunner of various games and had a small but dedicated following at the time. His name was Simpleflips. And not long after doing his first run, he had a look at the route for the Gathering of the Clouds. And well, he had a better idea. Simpleflips first completed some of the puzzles to get the lifts around the level moving. He then got on top of the big elevator motor and stood still there to set a safe position to prepare for a clip warp. He then kept jumping all the way back to the main hall. On his way back, he went through a load trigger that unloaded the room he came from and loaded the main hall. So when Simpleflips got himself stuck and he warped back to his safe position, none of the room's walls were loaded and he had a clear view of the chamber holding the Arkenstone, the level's final objective. From there, he rode one of the lifts he had started and eventually jumped to the Arkenstone and finished the level. This was a super creative and smart use of clip warping that drastically shortened the level and saved around a full 5 minutes over Aceprun's route. The day after this big discovery, Simpleflips continued doing runs of the game. Armed with new skips and extra practice, he started his timer and hit new game. Simpleflips started his run fairly safely. He didn't do the new Dreamworld skip, and the first few levels had a couple mistakes, but he made up for it with a solid overhill and underhill, putting him about even with Aceprun's run. In Riddles in the Dark, Simpleflips used a new strategy he found before. He was able to skip the stealth section without having to lure the final guard away. He did this by waiting out the perfect moment in the guard's patrol cycle and long jumping up a slope behind the final guard, from where he hit the switch that freed the dwarves and advanced the level. He wasn't able to get this first try, but by saving right before this section and getting it on his second try, he still saved a good amount of time over Aceprun. Unfortunately though, Simpleflips made a mistake in the minecart section after, which put him even with Aceprun again. In Flies and Spiders, Simpleflips took a starting route that was a little safer than the one Aceprun used. Unfortunately, Simpleflips fell down in the large tree climbing section, which cost him over a minute, but he would more than make up for it by having a great spider boss fight and skipping out on some saves, which brought him from being about a minute behind to being over a minute ahead. Simpleflips had learned the new Warm Welcome route and performed it with only a couple mistakes, which was impressive given the difficulty of the new route. Now, he was over 6 minutes ahead of Aceprun, not only thanks to the new route, but also because Aceprun had struggled a lot on this level. As you might recall, Aceprun had 2 major deaths in Inside Information, but Simpleflips performed this level almost flawlessly, pulling ahead another 4 minutes over Aceprun. But the Gathering of the Clouds was where Simpleflips could really extend his lead. He had his new skip, and he was up against the sloppy time of the old route, and Simpleflips pulled through. This alone put him another 13 minutes ahead of Aceprun. Simpleflips' endgame so far was amazing. But Simpleflips had made a crucial mistake. He hadn't prepared enough for the final level, the Clouds Burst. Early on, he got sniped by one of the Goblin Archers, which is an insta-kill with the low amount of health you have in a speedrun.
The fuck was that? Oh no! He hit me!
And later on, Simpleflips realized he forgot how to do the complex route for this level.
Am I even going the right way? What the fuck? Where am I? I've never seen that area before, but that's not the right way. Dude, where am I supposed to go?
He found himself lost, eventually falling back on doing some of the level normally. Simpleflips did eventually recollect himself, but the damage had been done. From being 23 minutes ahead into the final level, he slowed down to being 18 minutes and 30 seconds ahead on the final split. Simpleflips set a new record with a time of 1 hour, 17 minutes, and 25 seconds. This was still a huge improvement over Aceprun's time, partially thanks to new strategies, and partially because of much better execution in the end game, with the exception of the Clouds Burst. Simpleflips completed this run live on his stream. There, he had a small but dedicated following, but it was still much bigger than the Hobbit community itself. This brought more eyes to the speedrun than ever before, and the community was really starting to take shape, with new people learning the run and well-established community members still breaking the game. Unfortunately, despite the growing community, Aceprun no longer seemed interested in running and competing, but his legend was far from over. Ace-Broon stuck around and he would go on to find many huge skips in The Hobbit, starting off with early Arkenstone. Ace-Broon used his block puzzle skip to get to the top floor in the Gathering of the Clouds. Then he traveled through the room leading up to the Arkenstone room. He kept going until he reached the room with the lift motor, which was behind the Arkenstone room. He then waited and set a safe spot on the overhang on the wall to prepare for a clip warp. He then traveled back to the room leading up to the Arkenstone room and got himself stuck on a chain. He had moved through a loading trigger and had unloaded the lift motor room, and when he warped back, he too had a clear view of the Arkenstone room, and he was just close enough to perform a jump attack and fall into it, clearing the level in record time. Ace-Broon had done it. He had completely broken the Gathering of the Clouds. Ace-Broon combined Simpleflip's idea of unloading areas using a clip warp with his own block puzzle skip, finishing the Gathering of the Clouds in only 3 minutes. The only downside was that the block puzzle skip was very hard to do. Likely the hardest trick at this time because of how precise you had to be to climb the Durin statue, but it was an amazing discovery nonetheless. At the same time, a new runner from the Netherlands had started learning the game. This person also liked speedrunning various different games and frequently raced Simpleflips through some of them. So when he saw Simpleflips run the game, and he saw the advanced tricks, glitches, and movement, it was no surprise that he decided to pick up the game too. His name was Irule. Irule was young and enthusiastic, with a lot of free time on his hands, and it wouldn't take him very long to complete his first run. On his first run on October 4th, 2013, he set a time of 1 hour, 57 minutes, and 13 seconds, which he soon improved to 1 hour, 25 minutes, and 24 seconds, 8 minutes behind Simpleflips' record. Then on October 20th, roughly a month after Simpleflips' record, Irule set a time of 1 hour, 14 minutes, and 37 seconds, beating Simpleflips by almost 3 minutes and setting a new world record. However, the run was honestly not amazing. There were still a lot of mistakes, and it was close to Simpleflips' time despite Irule using the new Gathering of the Clouds skip. Although the run was arguably worse overall, there were a few highlights. Irule had found a faster spot to clip warp back from in the basement of a Warm Welcome, and although the end of the video seems to have been corrupted over time, we can calculate that Irule's Clouds Burst took about 7.5 minutes, which was considerably faster than Simpleflips did it. But Simpleflips wasn't done. He knew he could do better, and he could now use the new Gathering of the Clouds skip too. So he did. Just 1 day after Irule's record, Simpleflips got a run with a time of 1 hour, 9 minutes, and 48 seconds. Unfortunately, the video of this run was lost to time, but it's safe to assume the new early Arkenstone skip and a better Clouds Burst saved him most of that time. With the current strategies, that was a very respectable run, and beating it wouldn't be so easy. Yet Irule wasn't sitting still. On the very same day Simpleflips broke the world record, Irule broke the game.
Dude, this is an amazing find. You don't understand it?
Irule suddenly completely changed Riddles in the Dark. He found out that the area connecting to the minecart, which takes you to the end of the level, and the area where you first spot the imprisoned dwarf early on, were right next to each other. He also found out that if you grab the ledges of some of the platforms here and climb alongside them, you could clip through the cave walls and go out of bounds. From here, you could jump to the area just before the minecart. This completely skipped the longest part of the level and saved almost 5 minutes over how it was done before. And to top it all off, it was even easier to execute than the old route. A large discovery, and it would motivate Irule even more. So the very next day, on October 22nd, 2013, Irule was prepared to do his new riddle skip and continue doing runs. It wouldn't take him very long to get a run started, and thanks to his new riddle skip, Irule was already ahead by almost 7 minutes over his personal best. He would keep saving time on almost every single one of his splits, and pulled especially far ahead in a Warm Welcome by avoiding mistakes he had made before. It was unlikely that this run could turn sour, and it didn't. To everyone's surprise, the run actually had the potential to break the 1 hour mark, which would be a historic moment in the Hobbit speedrunning history. And it ultimately came down to one last slope boost right before the end of the game.
It's possible. It's possible. It's possible if I do this. No, I didn't do it. It's done. No sub 1.
But Irol missed it once, unfortunately killing the chances of getting a sub 1 hour run. The final time, and the new world record, was 1 hour and 4 seconds. This was undoubtedly a great run, but the community had started to notice something. Irol was actually playing with a considerable advantage. You see, Irol didn't own a physical copy of the game, so he played on an emulator for his speedruns. And unfortunately, GameCube emulation at the time wasn't as accurate to real hardware as it is now, leading to significantly faster load times, less lag, and various other advantages. This wasn't enough to make anyone question his new time as being the world record, but the advantages were undeniable. Although sub 1 hour was close, something had to be done first. So Irol ordered a physical copy of the game and got to grinding. It would take a little bit of time before he got back to his emulator skill level, and he still had to make up for the advantage he had lost. But about a month after switching, Irol was on a run ahead of his emulator record into the Cloud's Burst, and after some unfortunate events, Irol was once again faced with the final slope boost, with sub 1 hour on the line for the second time. Unfortunately, he missed it again. Irol's final time was 1 hour and 8 seconds, 4 seconds slower than his emulator world record. But if this run had been played on an emulator, it would have been sub 1 hour with ease. As such, the community had considered this 1 hour and 8 second time to be the new official world record. But Irol wasn't satisfied. Not only did he miss out on getting a sub 1 hour time once, but twice. He knew he could do much better. So over the next 2 weeks, he kept practicing and doing runs in order to break the 1 hour barrier. Irol had a solid start, even getting a gold split in Overhill and Underhill. Even his Flies and Spiders was looking to go very well, but Irol historically always struggled on the spider boss more than other runners, and he died on it twice, costing him just over a minute of potential time save. But thanks to his clean execution of the level itself, he still saved time on the split. The run was good so far, but it was when going into Barrels Out of Bond that Irol would really start to live up to his name.
Oh ho ho! Yes! Oh! Oh, saved 8 seconds.
Irol had just golded on 3 splits in a row, doing them faster than he had ever before, and his lead only grew bigger. But what awaited him was the Gathering of the Clouds, which was still as hard as ever and put an end to many good runs. And Irol did struggle with the block puzzle statue skip. However, this was to be expected given the difficulty of the trick, and he only ended up losing about 12 seconds over his record. That put Irol into the Cloud's Burst, the final level and the one that had been gatekeeping him from breaking the 1 hour mark 2 times before. But this time, he had almost 3 minutes to work with, putting him on track to potentially get a high 56-minute time. And things were going pretty well. Irol didn't even seem nervous as he was constantly talking about the game's mechanics. Or maybe that was his way to try to calm himself down. But through what happened next, Irol couldn't stay calm.
Oh my god, are you serious? That is so enraging. Are you serious? Dude, I'm choking. I'm choking! I mean, this is unfortunate. I thought I was gonna die. I lost a minute on the last split because of that shit.
You might not have been able to tell from the reaction, but Irol had done it. He had broken the 1 hour mark and finished a run in 58 minutes and 11 seconds. It was an amazing run with a bitter end. If you had just told someone the new world record, they would have been impressed. But to those who witnessed the run, it was clear that Irul was far from done, and that he could still do better. But Irul wasn't alone, because Aceprune was far from done too. While Aceprune wasn't doing runs of the game anymore, he wasn't sitting still. The thing about Aceprune was that nobody in the community ever really got in touch with him. Aceprune didn't participate in any group chats and would very rarely talk in any of the runner's stream chats. So everyone in the community eagerly anticipated the days that Aceprune would post his new findings, and Aceprune did not disappoint. On December 11th, 2013, a new skip appeared in everyone's subscription feeds. It was Aceprune, and he had broken the unbreakable level, Barrels Out of Bond. Aceprune found out that you could clip warp off of the vines in the basement area by climbing them a certain way. He then figured out that by setting his safe position where the dwarves were imprisoned, he could warp back from the basement, then walk over some invisible geometry to get to the end of the basement much quicker. This completely skipped some annoying jumps and an RNG heavy fight, not only saving time, but making the run much more comfortable. So with that new discovery, it didn't take long until Irul did more runs. Just a day after the new Barrels Out of Bond basement skip, Irul smashed his time, all the way from 58.11 down to 52.31. Even in the Cloud's Burst, Irul was able to clean up all the mistakes that had bugged him before, and he performed the final slope boost and reached the final barrel first try. It seemed unlikely that anyone could dethrone Irul, and this time of 52.31 would arguably be the best execution of a single route that the game would see for a while, because within the next month, the speedrun would change drastically. Just a day after the 52.31, Aceprune uploaded a new Cloud's Burst route with an earlier out of bounds for both the beginning and ending sections, both more difficult to perform, but undoubtedly a lot faster, by upwards of 3 minutes. But that was only the start of it, because no matter the optimizations and skips, there was still something plaguing the Hobbit speedruns. Occasionally, when long jumping, runners would notice their momentum completely stopping mid-jump, resulting in a much shorter long jump. This was a phenomenon the community called long jump glitch. In a lot of places this wouldn't matter much, but for some of the harder tricks you needed the full length of a long jump to make it, and in many cases, getting a long jump glitch there would mean death, and ultimately a run reset. This was something runners just had to deal with, something unavoidable, seemingly random, and too frequent to ignore. But when practicing, Irul noticed something. He long jumped around in Trollhole and noticed more of the level was being rendered in at the exact moment he did his long jump and got the long jump glitch. The cause was lag. That was the theory Irul came to. So Irul had an idea. He would try turning his camera in different ways on long jumps, with the goal of keeping as little of the level in view as possible, and it would lag less. And it turned out to be effective. This huge issue that runners just had to deal with so far could now be worked around by cleverly moving the camera. It was still hard to fully prevent long jump glitch from happening, but at least with the right camera strategies, there was a very good chance of avoiding it. Although there were some runners that were skeptical of Irul's theory about long jump glitch, Irul would soon prove it the best way he knew how. On December 28th, 2013, Irul had once again beaten the world record, this time with a 50-minute and 35-second time. By incorporating his method of avoiding long jump glitch, he got runs started much more consistently, and finally managed to reach the Cloud's Burst, where he was able to perform the new route discovered by Aceprune. This was a great run, yet Irul didn't consider it as good as his past time. A sub 50 time was looking very doable, but Irul had been slowly burning out of the game. The Hobbit had a lot of difficult tricks, especially in the beginning. It would still take many attempts to get runs going, and this was getting to him. But worst of all was the Flies and Spiders boss fight. Irol had been really vocal about his dislike of this boss fight already, and the more he tried to optimize his time, the harder the boss fight became. So Irol planned to take a step back from the Hobbit. But one day, the community spotted something game-changing in their subscription feeds. It was a Flies and Spiders boss skip, of course, uploaded by Acebrune. This was one of, if not the most remarkable discovery in the Hobbit speedrunning history, and it had just quietly appeared, completely unannounced. Skipping the spider boss was unthinkable. The game would only end the level after beating all of the bosses and waiting. Yet Acebrune had done it. The spider boss was no more. But how? Acebrune had gone out of bounds right before entering the big tree with the spider boss. He then climbed all the way behind the big tree's entrance and jumped down. A cutscene played, Bilbo fell, and the end of level shop screen just showed up. It was another alternate end trigger, one that didn't require the spider boss to be beaten. Just like Roast Mutton and Troll had them, it turned out that Flies and Spiders had one too, but it was in a ridiculous out of bounds location, one where nobody had even thought of checking. Nobody other than Acebrune. The new Flies and Spiders boss skip put Irol's plans to step back from the game on hold. There was no way he was going to leave that free time save laying there. So on January 25th, 2014, Irol once again got back to work. He had actually been working on his movement all throughout the game, and it showed as he was quickly gaining a lead early on. The run was looking very solid into Flies and Spiders, and after doing the new spider boss skip, Irol was almost 5 minutes ahead of his record. But unfortunately, he would struggle with the A Warm Welcome save jump, losing 2 potential minutes. But the rest of the run actually went really well, despite Irol having some final struggles in the Cloud's Burst. The new world record was 47 minutes and 19 seconds. Yet, it was far from the best Irol could do. But Irol took relief in the thought that this record wouldn't easily be broken for another little while. So this run stayed the world record. Despite its flaws, it stayed the record longer than any before it. But the speedrun had been evolving so quickly that the long time this record stayed for was actually only just under 3 months. In those 3 months, Irol had regained his motivation to speedrun, and within the following month, he ascended.
There we go, I'm up there. And that's a new gold split. Nice. Dang, I love that skip. A little bit slow, but here is the ending trigger. 44:45. Finally. Ah, I made it. Good. Wow, gold. Dang, so much for my near-perfect splits. Yeah. Dude, did I stand still there for too long? Fuck. Dang, that's bad. I'm mad. Oh, that's pretty fast. Oh, gold, really? Okay, I still made it. Here's a difficult jump that can kill the run. And we're fine. Okay. Okay, I made it. Good. I can see because the health was going down. Oh, gold, really? That's cool. Okay, first try nice. If you're not fast enough. I made it. Okay, we're good. Oh my god. I did it! 42:28! Yeah! And that was exactly correct when I said I could gold by 20 seconds.
After 3 massive new times, iRoll had lowered the world record all the way down to 42 minutes and 27 seconds. This was undoubtedly the best Hobbit speedrun seen up until this point, despite some of the tricks only getting more and more difficult. The run still wasn't perfect, but to beat this time you would need great movement and great trick execution. Even the standards for slash jumps were only getting higher and higher. The skill gap between iRoll and the rest of the community had only grown. For the first time since iRoll started running the game, he was actually satisfied, and finally decided to truly take a step back from the game. Maybe one day, like magic, Aceprune would upload another huge new skip, and iRoll would be motivated again. But unfortunately, that day never came. The Flies and Spiders boss skip was the final Hobbit any % skip Aceprune has ever posted, and it seemed like the community might finally start to lose interest in the speedrun. But there was something special about iRoll's 42-minute and 27-second speedrun. Usually when a speedrunner performs serious attempts, they are laser focused on their gameplay and tend to stay quiet during difficult sections. But in iRoll's newest record, he was almost purely commentating, with little to no dead air.
But yeah, now we're going out of bounds and we're actually going to hit a trigger that is most likely left here from beta. Coming up is a jump where we're going to be going out of bounds. We're going to long jump onto another area of the map, which is going to be 4 cutscenes you have to mash through. And while the cutscene is going on, your position can get reset.
Not very different from a Games Done Quick marathon speedrun, iRoll explained almost everything in the run. The skips, the tricks, and his personal thoughts were all recorded in his best run. This was the record, and probably the first thing anyone interested in speedrunning The Hobbit would see. And rightfully, this run was viewed more than any other Hobbit speedrun at the time. Where runs would previously accumulate a few hundred views at best, this run would see thousands. And among those thousands were new speedrunners with the potential of closing the skill gap. Some of the notable speedrunners were Silence Erupts, an older runner who held 2nd place, Shockster, a friend of iRoll who had really high standards for runs, Kerf Murph, a newer runner who was improving rapidly and was also interested in other categories, Tangrams, a slightly older runner who took frequent breaks from the game but always came back stronger, and D-Whatever, also a friend of iRoll who was speedrunning other games alongside his main game. These runners would go on to compete with each other and eventually close in on iRoll. The skill gap had been clear so far, and real world record competition hadn't existed since iRoll got the first sub 1 hour time. But suddenly, and unprecedented in the Hobbit speedrunning history, the top times were getting within minutes, sometimes seconds of each other. The leaderboard was getting stacked, the competition was getting fierce, and the community was growing. And Silence Erupts was the one leading the charge. And finally on December 25th, 2014, 8 months after iRoll's 42:27, Silence Erupts was on pace to finally beat the world record.
Okay, got it. This might be it. If everything goes well and right, and I think I can screw up once. Nice. Nice. Wait, what? Wow, wasted that time. Whoa. No, that's what I thought. Okay.
It was probably the pressure. Silence Erupts had been making a lot of uncharacteristic mistakes in the Cloud's Burst. It was going to be extremely close, but it was still possible.
This is gonna be as close can get. Oh, maybe not. Come on. Jump! Rip. iRoll. Your time has been saved for another day.
Ultimately, Silence Erupt missed out on the world record by 9 seconds. Irul's 1-year streak of being the uncontested world record holder would continue for at least a little longer. It had now been 8 months since Irul had last done runs of The Hobbit, but he finally wanted to come back. Irul started de-rusting. He was practicing skips, grinding individual level runs, and finally prepared himself to beat his old record and keep it safe from those who challenged it. But it was during this practice that Irul had an idea. Right before the final section in the Clouds Burst, you had to hit an explosive barrel to lower a bridge so Beorn, the skin changer turned into a bear, could cross. But Irul figured out that you could throw a rock from the opposite side precisely over a pillar, hitting the barrel behind it and saving a nice 15 seconds. The date is now January 27th, 2015, and once again, this time after a longer break than ever before, Irul went back to running, and he made a bold statement on the game's title screen.
Alright, so are you guys ready for a sub 41 run? Are you hyped? Because it will happen. Like right now. Right this instant.
Despite the bold claim, Irul's start wasn't looking amazing. He was already 8 seconds behind when going into Overhill and Underhill, but he managed to gold split it and saved a sizable 20 seconds. This was probably because of just how movement heavy the level is and how much individual level practice had helped. Going into Flies and Spiders, Irul could potentially save another 30 seconds here because of mistakes he made in his record, but unfortunately, he accidentally fell into the void soon after starting the level and going out of bounds. This clip warped him back to the beginning and cost him his chance to save a lot of time here. However, this mistake wasn't catastrophic, and Irul still saved a few seconds, and it most certainly didn't kill his momentum.
I think that was it. It was it! Whoa! 40.05? Am I summer best now? I'm very scared. Still saved a ton of time. The nerves are getting to me. I can't think straight anymore. You see that? That's the shit right there. That is the shit. Just a little more. We in there, guys. We in there. We fucking yes. 40.59. 40.59. Yes.
An astonishingly massive new world record, clocking in at 40 minutes and 58 seconds, surprising Irul as much as everyone else. Almost all of that time save came just from better execution and nothing else. The competition that was inching their way closer was once again left behind, and Irul had proven that it would take more to dethrone him. But Irul was still motivated and shifted his focus a bit to glitch hunting, and he would see results in the coming month, where Irul made 2 significant discoveries. First, for inside information. Normally you have to wait for over a minute for the water to rise in the big chasm, but by doing the block puzzle to plug the drains in a very specific way, he could then clip warp back up from the chasm while activating the right triggers to end the level. Something nobody was able to figure out how to do before, but due to the large amount of steps required, this only saved about 16 seconds instead of a potential minute. Irul's second discovery was something huge in Barrels Out of Bond. Inspired by Aceprune's old research here, Irul figured out that you could get the last cellar key early and completely skip the basement. By setting a safe position in the stockade where the dwarves are imprisoned, and keeping it there until reaching the barrel room, then clip warping by getting stuck on a leaf, most of the stockade was now unloaded. Faced with a void of what seemed like nothingness, he long jumped with a precise angle and grabbed the basement cellar key before getting warped back up, from where he could reach the key pedestal just as easily. This skip saved almost a minute and a half, making a sub 40 speedrun very realistic. But Irol wasn't the only one finding skips. There was someone named Crixium, or Crix for short. Crix had previously been working on routing the PC version of The Hobbit, but recently switched to playing console, and soon after, Crix found a large skip in Flies and Spiders. He found out that where runners were purposefully hitting a load trigger before, they could instead avoid it and reach the end of the level quicker by doing a precise long jump over a bit of void. This was another major discovery, skipping the whole large tree climbing section and saving 50 seconds. Thanks to all of these discoveries, the world record that was previously quite optimized now had over 2 minutes of free time save waiting for it. And obviously, Irol couldn't let that stand, so on April 25th, 2015, Irol improved the record to a 38:32 using the new Barrels Out of Bond and Flies and Spiders routes. But this run frankly didn't have the same level of polish as some of his old records. There were many sloppy mistakes, and Irol even decided not to do the new inside information skip he was so proud of. The run was even done off-stream, without the commentary that Irol had loved to do. It was clear that he just wanted to run with the new skips, and that he wasn't truly invested in doing runs anymore. Irol had considered quitting a few times in the past already, and the same signs were showing again. But Irol still enjoyed breaking the game, so he continued finding skips and glitches, and over the next year he would steadily optimize the route. But he wasn't alone. On July 10th, 2015, Irol found a way to skip having to save Corwin in the Cloud's Burst by precisely avoiding a cutscene trigger, saving 10 seconds, and removing the last required fight from the speedrun. On August 28th, Irol improved the middle section of the Flies and Spiders route by going out of bounds later and hitting the load trigger in a hollow log from the outside, saving another 14 seconds. On August 29th, Crix found a faster but much harder troll hole skip that slope boosted out of bounds earlier, saving about 10 seconds. On August 30th, Irol learned of a different community breaking the game, the Minimums community, which focused on beating the game with certain restrictions. Someone named Samwise in this community had found a Flies and Spiders end trigger that was slightly closer by and could also be used in the speedrun. On August 31st, Crix found a new Flies and Spiders beginning route that went out of bounds earlier and is a little easier, although it was slightly slower. But Irol then tweaked this route a bit to make it save 4 seconds. The potential time saves were adding up again, and a mid-37 speedrun was looking very doable. But the gap between Irol and the rest was still considerable, the closest now being Silence Erupts, who had a 39:43 at this point in time. But unfortunately, Irol had finally completely lost his drive to do runs, yet he was prideful and stubborn when it came to The Hobbit. This eventually caused friction between him and the community, and eventually, Irol decided to quit for real. The 38:32 was the last time ever posted by Irol. Time passed, and eventually, the world record that Irol had left behind remained uncontested for over a year, and community activity had slowed down significantly. However, that year had not been completely uneventful, at least not for Crixium, who had now fully moved from the PC version over to the more competitive GameCube version. Crix had been steadily improving his PB and had been implementing some of the new strategies. While competition had stagnated, he kept grinding. Crix didn't have the best equipment for recording runs, but that didn't stop him either. Crix was slowly pushing the community forward, almost all by himself. Finally, on May 2nd, 2016, 1 year and 8 days after Irol's 38:32, Crixium would take the world record with a 37:57, breaking the 38-minute barrier and dethroning Irol, who had then held the world record for almost 2.5 years. Crix had done what nobody could do for years, but Crix wouldn't stop there. Interestingly, Crix was unique in that he had a bit of a different mindset from most other runners.
I say, I'm gonna just use the routes that I know, and I'm gonna push myself as low as I can go with those routes. I could easily save like 20 seconds off any run just by updating the routing, but with the number of resets it would add on, it wouldn't really be fun anymore.
And that showed in his runs. Crix would sometimes not use the most up-to-date strategies so he could get even more runs going, and instead aim to optimize his time using just the strategies he believed in. And it worked. By slowly implementing new strategies instead of potentially letting them kill runs, he started improving his time steadily. 2 weeks after breaking the world record, Crix once again improved his time, now to 36 minutes and 44 seconds. This was a very impressive run, and Crix was improving fast. This time, Crix chose to do a safer Dreamworld strat, and he instead used the much faster Trollhole skip that he had found 3 months prior. The rest of the run was very solid. Crix took it a little bit safer than other runners did, but because of that, he made way fewer mistakes, and ultimately managed to save a lot of time. Quoting Crix from the time, "Pretty close to perfect. Not much to improve in this run, really. Just a bunch of minor mishaps here and there, like getting 2 long jump glitches on the save jump in a warm welcome." And he was right. The run was extremely solid indeed. So with that, Crix's new world record stood for another 5 months. But something amazing happened within those 5 months. Crix had made an insane discovery, one that would drastically increase the quality of the Hobbit speedruns. Crix found out about capture cards. With Crix's pixel count being exponentially higher than ever before, he was back in the game. And over the next year, Crix steadily improved the world record. On September 16th, 2017, after 4 new world records, Crix had optimized his time all the way down to 35 minutes and 10 seconds. He was now using most of the optimal strats. With every PB, you could see his movement getting better, even better than any runner before him. Crix couldn't be stopped. His runs still had mistakes in some of the hardest parts, but there was nobody that could compete with his movement and execution. There was once again a seemingly insurmountable skill gap between the world record holder and the rest, and it wasn't looking like it would close anytime soon. But despite the skill gap, Crix would not be the only one to push the speedrun forward. That's because something had been going on behind the scenes, something major. Someone named MDPie had joined the community, and he was dissecting the game on a technical level, unlike anyone before him. MDPie knew how to hack the game and explore it from the inside, and MDPie had made big discoveries in the past few months. Most notably, MDPie discovered how to abuse menu glitches. This is undoubtedly the most game-breaking discovery ever made in the Hobbit speedrunning history. By pressing R and A on the same frame when selecting Exit Game, an invisible, glitched copy of the game's start menu would be made. This copy of the menu had a very special property. It could store the end level event if you ended a level with the glitch active. MDPie figured out that you could abuse this by making a save at the end of an unexpected party, then continue to the next level and make a new save there. From there, you could load back into an unexpected party, cause the menu glitch, then end the level. Now, the end level event is stored, and you can load back into your save of the level you came from. Then all that had to be done was to find a text box pop up in the level you are trying to skip, which started the stored end level event. And all of a sudden, you skipped the level. This could be repeated for many levels, finishing them all in 1 to 3 minutes each, but it did require a frame-perfect input. This discovery absolutely broke the speedrun as we knew it, potentially saving well over 10 minutes, and much more if you didn't count load times. But it was also highly controversial. When using menu glitches, the majority of movement and cool tricks on the run were completely invalidated. The run would devolve into just hitting these frame-perfect menu glitches and waiting on loading screens for a good portion of the run as you save and load between levels. So it was no surprise that menu glitches became its own category, one that most runners would rather forget about, and one that very few would actually run. And the any percent category now turned into any percent no menu glitches, or any percent NMG for short, and that's where we continue our story. Fortunately, Not everything MDPie found was controversial. Actually, far from it. By exploring the PC version's memory and hacking it, MDPie had found an insane tool for glitch hunting. It was a developer menu. This was a menu used by the developers to test the game, giving them access to tools no normal player should ever have, like flying, visualizing triggers, showing invisible walls, and much, much more. MDPie was now able to glitch hunt much more effectively, and he would use it to great success. And so on October 13th, 2017, MDPie had found something major in a warm welcome. Until now, almost all main objectives in the level had to be cleared before being able to finish it. But MDPie had found the one thing that could truly break a warm welcome. An alternate end trigger. One that didn't require any of the quests to be completed, and would end the level upon just touching it. Unfortunately, this end trigger was located far out of bounds and was completely covered by an invisible floor. But when Crix heard about this end trigger, Crix was able to figure out a way to reach it. Crix realized that the invisible floor covering the alternate end trigger wasn't loaded when Bilbo entered the warehouse. Entering the warehouse still required the thief quest to be completed, so Crix started the thief quest with his clip warp position at the thief's destination. Then he warped back. From here, he jumped out of bounds and carefully placed his safe position above the alternate end trigger while the invisible floor was still loaded. He then platformed back inbounds while jumping as to not update his safe position, and got back to where the thief quest ends. Then he waited while jumping until the thief came back. This set off a bunch of cutscenes during which Bilbo touches the ground, so he skipped these very fast and started jumping right after them again, which was just barely fast enough to avoid his safe position from updating. From there, Crix went into the warehouse and quickly got himself stuck to clip warp back. And finally, when he warped back to his safe spot out of bounds, the invisible floor was no longer loaded, and he fell straight into the alternate end trigger. This was a massive skip for one of the longer levels in the game, saving almost a minute and a half, and it was engineered by some of the greatest people in the Hobbit speedrunning history. Over the next month and a half, Crix started optimizing his any % NMG time using the new A Warm Welcome skip.
Nice. And I got long jump glitch. There we go. Pretty sure that should work. Alright, cool. Nice. This could be a sub 34 if I get a really, really good clouds burst. No way! No way! It was! No way! No way! 3359. Nice. Alright, nice. Okay, yeah. That was awesome. 3329. It's a sub 3330. This is somehow better than my previous nearly perfect run. That was cool as well. Okay, that was an insane barrels out of bond. Whew, that brought my summon best down quite a bit. 3314, okay.
My favorite thing about running the game is probably just the feeling of being really successful at tricks in the game, especially really difficult tricks like the save, jump, and warm welcome. And also the feeling of just having a consistent run up to any point that doesn't have any major mistakes.
Krix had made insane progress, lowering the record all the way down to 32 minutes and 54 seconds on November 30th, 2017. While at first, Krix was steadily improving his PB while skipping out on some of the harder strats, he had now implemented almost everything there was to implement, including the fastest troll hole skip that Krix had held off on using for so long. And all of that with better movement than ever before. Although funnily enough, in the end, Krix lost 4 seconds when he failed to interact with the final barrel in the Cloud's Burst. Krix still wasn't fully satisfied. He knew he could improve this run and was planning to do so in the future, but for now, the world record would lay dormant for a while. There were still old and new runners improving their times in the background, but no one threatened Krix's record. But then, MDPie made another major discovery, one of the biggest the category had seen since its speedrunning infancy. There was one level that was longer than any other, one that had previously only barely been broken by iRoll through an overly complex skip that didn't save a lot of time. It was inside information, but there was no alternate end trigger here, and even if you could reach the final staircase, it was blocked by an insurmountable invisible wall that only disappeared when you raised the water and helped the dwarves. Though insurmountable, one could go below it. By clipping out of bounds without completing any of the quests, the final staircase wasn't yet loaded, but the invisible wall blocking the end trigger was. However, the end trigger extended further downward than the invisible wall, not by a whole lot, but just barely enough for MDPie. He figured out that you could perform a slash off of the edge to get a bunch of forward momentum, and follow it up with a tight jump attack to just barely reach the end trigger without hitting the invisible wall. This completely skipped having to do any quests and inside information. Now, you just needed to reach the out-of-bounds spot as quickly as possible and perform the skip. This turned inside information from a 6-minute level into a 1.5 minute one. But the inside information skip was extremely hard to do, easily the hardest trick the run had ever seen. If your slash timing off of the edge was too good, you would hit the invisible wall early and lose your momentum, and if the slash wasn't good enough, you wouldn't reach the trigger at all. On top of that, you still needed to time the very tight jump attack, and if any of those things weren't executed perfectly, it meant death. The reward was huge, yet so was the risk, and until someone performed an amazing run with this skip first try, there would always be a lot of time to save. Once again, a discovery so big had been made that it just about invalidated even the best runs, and so it was Krix who continued his grind. Because of the 4.5 potential minutes of time save on inside information, Krix was able to take many runs he normally wouldn't continue, so he once again fell back on the older trollhole strat in order to help get those runs going. And just a day after, Krix managed to set a new record of 31 minutes and 16 seconds. This run was definitely thanks to the new skip. Krix was already 26 seconds behind into inside information, and the new skip took him 2 minutes worth of attempts. After that, the Cloud's Burst had some big mistakes. But either way, a record was a record, and Krix wouldn't stop there. Just about a week later, Krix was on another run that made it into inside information. He was already 11 seconds ahead of his world record, and here, over 2 minutes could be saved. But if, and only if, Krix hit the ever so difficult inside information skip on his first try. And he did. Krix was now a whopping 2 minutes and 15 seconds ahead of his record. This was easily on pace to sub 30, yet there was still more time to save in the Cloud's Burst. This time, it all came together, and Krix finished the Cloud's Burst with a time of 28 minutes and 46 seconds. An amazing run with very few mistakes, completely smashing the sub 30 minute mark. The Hobbit speedruns had evolved more than anyone would have imagined, and Krix was holding the forefront with no signs of giving it up. But there was one cycle that had repeated itself. Krix once again chose to forego some of the harder and less consistent strategies in order to focus on optimizing his time with the new inside information skip. The most obvious dropped strategy being the fastest trollhole skip. If Krix implemented it together with other more difficult strats, he might just be able to push the record below 28 minutes. But Krix had seemingly grown to really dislike the faster troll hole skip, so instead, he chose to focus on the routes he liked to run, and truly perfect those. Finally, 2 months after the 2846, Krix got a run that seemed like it was meant to be. He started off with a great beginning, hitting trick after trick with no signs of slowing down. As expected, the older troll hole strat was still in play, but Krix's execution of it was top notch. Even up to flies and spiders, there were no mistakes worth mentioning. Here, Krix did make some tiny mistakes, like getting a weird starting boost and accidentally going into first person mode for a moment, but his overall execution was stellar. Krix even re-implemented a small time-saving slope boost at the end of flies and spiders, and he was now ahead by 5 seconds. In barrels out of bond, Krix had the chance to save some time because he had previously gotten a long jump glitch on the out-of-bounds jump to the basement cellar key. This time though, his barrels out of bond was in top shape, now ahead by 18 seconds. Even a warm welcome went as usual, posing no problems for Krix. Finally, it was time for inside information. In his record, he had gotten this skip first try, but he had still saved before it. This time, there was no reason to save, as missing it once would cost Krix all the time he had gained. And because of that, Krix could also clip out of bounds earlier, not only potentially saving time on skipping a save point, but taking a shorter path altogether. It was time to execute the hardest trick in the game, one that had killed many runs, but now on a run that was near perfect. With everything on the line, Krix went for it. He hit it. The run was now a massive 34 seconds ahead into the gathering of the clouds. This pace was insane. Krix had definitely gotten better at the Durin statue skip, but it was still far from guaranteed. Fortunately, Krix had no issues with it and cleanly reached the cloud's burst, even saving another 3 seconds. The pressure was on. First, the slash jump into out-of-bounds slope boost while goblin archers risk one-shotting you from range. Done. Next, Corwin skip. Moving just a tiny bit too far would risk activating the battle, and in worst case, death. A bit shaky, but done. Next, the slope boost off of the catapult. No problem. Coming up, the precise rock throw to lower the bridge early took some time for the setup, but first try. And finally, the final out of bounds to reach the final barrel where Krix had fallen once before. It had been done. Under the immense pressure of a run of that pace, Krix was able to pull off a very solid clouds burst, ultimately setting a new world record of 28 minutes and 12 seconds. This was truly an amazing time set by none other than the person who had been leading the community for the past 3 years. This was truly a level of optimization that the community had never seen before. This run became a highlight of the community, viewed by many more than usual, and it was very well deserved. Quoting Krix himself, "This run is outstanding. There are no major mistakes anywhere, and the only potential time save is from improving the routes I use. I'm probably going to stop running this category for a while, since this run is so close to perfect." So Krix left it at that. He had pulled so far ahead of the competition that it was more unlikely than ever before that anyone would match him, even if they chose to do the harder strategies. Krix moved on to making community resources like guides and routing other categories, so the record remained at 2812. It wasn't like nobody was trying to catch up, but Krix's level of movement and execution was that far ahead. Still, there was Zaltrip, a fairly new runner who'd been making big strides, lowering his PB from 50 minutes all the way down to 30 minutes and 31 seconds in about 4 months. And there was also Schneider, who had mainly been focusing on the PC version, but eventually lowered his GameCube personal best down to 30 minutes and 54 seconds. Yet, Inside Information skip was still an absolute run killer, and even more for non-top level runners. but Zaltrip found a way to get very fast retries on Inside Information Skip without losing much time or saving. He found out that if you attempt the skip on the left side and don't use your jump attack, Bilbo would go in a zombie state by dying at the end of the fade out animation. In this state, Bilbo's health is 0, but you can continue to play the game for a very short while, and that was just enough for the fade out animation to warp you back to the door, as it would if the stairs were loaded. So as long as you judged your slash boost off of the edge before committing to a jump attack, you could retry the ridiculously hard Inside Information Skip very quickly. This was a very nice find. Looking back to Crix, he wasn't completely done with the Hobbit. Though Crix had no plans of improving his any % NMG time at this point, he was still invested in the game and in growing the community. And Crix got an idea to help do just that. With some push from other community members, Crix decided to submit The Hobbit as a speedrun in Summer Games Done Quick 2019. This is a huge speedrunning marathon event that is held twice a year. The event has raised millions of dollars for charity, and even many non-speedrunners love to watch. But it isn't easy to get a speedrun into a Games Done Quick event, as they get loads of submissions, and Crix wasn't the first to try submitting The Hobbit. But if The Hobbit made it in, that would bring many eyes to the relatively small community. This was a chance for growth, and for a great cause no less. The Hobbit community had grown substantially since the last time they tried to get into a Games Done Quick event, so it wasn't impossible that the game would make it in. And so, Crix got back to doing some practice runs, with the hopes of getting The Hobbit featured. In these practice runs, Crix started implementing the strategies that he decided not to use before. This included the fast troll hole skip that could save 20 seconds. Crix even planned to use something called web skip in Riddles in the Dark. This is a very tricky long jump shortcut that didn't seem worth it before, but if done successfully, it could save around 10 seconds. Perhaps it was because these were practice runs that Crix seemed very laid back. So laid back that one run, Crix was non-stop chatting about the TV show Stranger Things. And in that run, Crix had hit the fast troll skip and made it into Overhill and Underhill, where he had a thought.
The run that I spend bashing Season 2 Episode 7 is gonna be the run that gets world record, and I don't know how I'm gonna feel about that.
It's clear that Crix said this jokingly, but soon that thought would become a bit more realistic. Thanks to the fast troll hole skip, web skip in Riddles in the Dark, and great execution of flies and spiders, Crix was now already 28 seconds ahead of his record. The pace was insane, but now Crix was left with little to no more time to save from faster strats. So could he hold this lead? There was some time loss, mainly from struggling with the clip warp in Barrels Out of Bond and needing 6 attempts for the Inside Information skip. Fortunately, thanks to Zaltrip's fast retry strat, not too much time was lost, and after a clean gathering of the clouds, Crix was still ahead by 11 seconds. This run had suddenly turned very serious. With a good clouds burst, this could be sub 28 minutes. To achieve that, Crix chose to do active Corwin skip, where you fully activate the Corwin fight. This is much easier to do quickly, but if Corwin died before loading the next area, it was run over. It was up to Crix to warp back as quickly as possible, and to pray that the goblins didn't lower Corwin's health too quickly. It was close, but the run wasn't guaranteed yet. Unfortunately, following this, Crix made 2 sloppy mistakes, both by overshooting where he wanted to go. The chance of a sub 28 was almost gone, but Zaltrip had actually discovered a slightly faster out of bounds at the end, which Crix was planning to use. This was going to be close.
Yes, okay. Let's go. I think it is. It's gonna be just barely. It's gonna be just barely. If it is, it's gonna be just barely. No, it actually is by a few seconds then. Wow, jump up there, please. 27:57. Well, that's it.
Crix just finally beat his 28:12 with a sub 28 no less. The previous world record had stood for 13 months, the longest in the Hobbit speedrunning history, yet Crix finally beat it, while talking about stranger things for most of the run. It had been 3 years since Crix took the world record from Irol in 2016, and Crix had now lowered his first world record at 37:57 down to a 27:57. This was a massive improvement thanks to the many of the great people in the community, and of course, Crix himself. There was still some time to save in barrels out of bond and inside information, but thanks to Crix now implementing some of the harder and less consistent strategies, it was ever so unlikely that this time would get beaten. It wouldn't be long until Crix got some well-deserved news. The Hobbit had been accepted into Summer Games Done Quick 2019. The speedrun this community had been working so hard to improve was going to get its chance to shine on the big stage and to help raise money for a great cause. There's almost nothing better you can ask for as a small yet dedicated speedrunning community, and everyone was stoked. Finally, the big day came. On June 24th, 2019, Crix got to show the Hobbit speedrun to the world. With a crowd behind him and tens of thousands of people watching live on Twitch, the spotlight was on him and the speedrun, and Crix brought some people along with him to help explain the speedrun in great detail. They were Author Blues, Kerf Murph, and Tina Hacks, the first two now being longtime Hobbit speedrunning veterans. Together, they were able to highlight the impressive skips and hard work of the community, and not to forget the jankiness of the game.
There's a lot of really subtle movement that's going on here. The constant slash jumping, plus anytime he's going somewhat downhill, he long jumps. Perfect.
Okay,
perfect. That jump looks really harmless, but this game is very fickle with the movement. So this is a really easy clip out of bounds. You just slide along that wall.
11 minutes and 51 seconds. Crix has done more than Peter Jackson did in 3 hours.
Oh, God. And the reason why he wants to do that is because now that he's in this room, that other room is unloaded. It allows him to just jump straight out into the void to collect an item that's out here.
I don't know how that angle worked.
Staying up after a long day packing to watch my childhood favorite game get destroyed.
So if he did not lose his clip position at Bard, then we should just see a blank void and then the end of the level. And there we go.
Perfect.
Perfect.
This is basically where the end level trigger is. So you have to fall and then like slash jump at a weird angle. It's very difficult.
For what it's worth, Crix actually taught us all how to do this with his wonderful MS Paint skills. Perfect.
There was.
In this marathon run, where Crix only got one chance to show the best he could do, Crix managed to get a time of 34 minutes and 6 seconds.
Time.
This was solid for a marathon run, and Crix undoubtedly did the speedrun justice. Thanks to the great performance by Crix and the Couchcasters, the Hobbit community got some needed renewed attention. With the efforts of everyone involved, this little game that had very mixed opinions on launch managed to slowly but steadily keep growing as a speedrun, 16 years after its release. After Summer Games Done Quick, the community saw some growth, which was very welcomed. As for Crix, there was still some time to save in his 27:57, but it wasn't going to be easy. Crix, however, still wanted something else from the game for a while, so he kept focusing on other Hobbit-related stuff, like the button challenges, where you try to beat the game while doing as few of certain button presses as possible. Crix was also grinding the All Quests category, where you complete every quest the game gives you. But here and there, Crix still did some any% NMG runs. Despite any% NMG being an afterthought for Crix at this point, on August 4th, 2019, Crix got a run going into Riddles in the Dark that was already almost 5 seconds ahead. Crix had stopped doing web skip during this time, yet when finishing Riddles in the Dark without web skip, Crix was only 2 seconds behind. But the next few levels weren't so clean. With a sloppy flies and spiders, a missed clip and barrels out of bond, and some more sloppy movement in a warm welcome, Crix was now 15 seconds behind going into inside information. But this is where Crix could reclaim his lead. But it was going to be extremely hard unless he hit inside information skip the first try.
This is what I was talking about earlier with the area that I just drop down and jump attack instead of doing a long jump. I used to do a long jump there. I don't anymore. Okay, What? 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 No.
After that amazing inside information, Crix was now 7 seconds ahead. The gathering of the clouds could still make or break the run, but Crix pulled it off, and he was now 8 seconds ahead. You might have noticed that Crix rarely ever ran against his previous splits, so when he reached the Clouds Burst loading screen, he started to calculate if he could set a new record, and under the pressure, Crix ended up thinking that he needed an amazing Clouds Burst, while in reality, he was actually still significantly ahead. So in the Clouds Burst, Crix pulled all the stops.
Oh! Oh my goodness, he's already that low on health. Don't die, Corwin, please. Hey, Corwin still has plenty of health left. No, what? Oh, I almost had it. That would have been cool. Right here, I think. Yep, first one. Okay, 27:41. Cool.
And there it was. Crix set a new record of 27 minutes and 41 seconds. What a back and forth run. Though the start was a bit rough, Crix more than made up for it in the end game by hitting inside information skip first try, then pulling off a great Clouds Burst. And the only strat Crix had skipped out on was web skip and Riddles in the Dark. Yet he still believed there was time to be saved, and declared, sub 27:30 coming soon. But that wouldn't happen anytime soon, as this 27:41 would become the new longest standing world record in the Hobbit speedrunning history. Still, the community had grown in recent times, and another top runner, Shadow Knight, managed to be the second person ever to get a sub 30-minute time, at 29 minutes and 58 seconds. Yet, it didn't seem like any of the current runners had the drive to try and beat Crix, who had been holding the record for over 4 years now. But there was someone new who showed promise. In June 2020, someone going by the name of Ice Bagel started uploading individual level runs on a GameCube emulator. Not just any runs, but individual level world records. Ice Bagels quickly took the records in Trollhole, Flies and Spiders, Inside Information, and the Gathering of the Clouds, yet he had never even posted a full game run. And on June 5th, 2020, Ice Bagels posted something great. Together with the help of a friend, he had found a long jump setup for inside information skip. By long jumping at a specific angle and jump attacking at just the right time, you could achieve the same distance as the slash boost off of the edge. The difference was that a long jump always had a consistent distance, so it was much easier to pull off. That said, this was a spot that was at a high risk of causing a long jump glitch, so you still needed to be careful with your setup. Either way, this made inside information skip even more accessible and much more consistent to those willing to learn the setup. So with everything that Ice Bagels had shown, who knew what his full run potential may have been? Finally, on June 9th, 2020, Ice Bagel submitted his first full game speedrun to the leaderboard. He had achieved a time of 29 minutes and 23 seconds, instantly putting him second place on the leaderboard behind Crix, and achieving the third ever sub 30 in the Hobbit. This level of improvement was unseen, and nobody had heard of Ice Bagels before. Who was this guy? Well, the community soon found out. Ice Bagels wasn't a new runner at all. No, Ice Bagels was potentially one of the most experienced runners the game had seen so far. Ice Bagels was actually Irule, the previous world record holder who had quit 5 years ago. Irule had come back under this username because he felt nostalgic for the game, but he wasn't sure if he actually wanted to commit to speedrunning it again. But once Irule started setting competitive times and realized that he still had the potential to compete, he revealed himself. Ice Bagels was just a throwaway account, but Irule did actually change his username over time. Irule now went by MKarma. I, the creator of this video, am MKarma, and I was known as Irule. Sorry for hiding this from you so far. I thought the video would flow more naturally this way. Anyway, I'll be referring to MKarma and Irule as myself in first person from now on. I was going hard on grinding the game again, and individual level runs were quite fun to do and provided great practice, combined with the fact that I had the experience of being an old world record holder and one of the first Hobbit speedrunners, meant I could climb back to the top fairly quickly. But the Hobbit speedruns had certainly evolved a ton from when I ran it as Irule. Many new strats had been found, some of which were harder than any I used to do, and the standards for movement were much higher. Although I had shown potential, there was still no way of knowing if I could end Crix's 4-year streak of holding the world record. I had a ton of catching up to do. At first, I came back to speedrunning on an emulator so I could use something other than the GameCube controller, which caused considerable hand pains for me. Even though modern versions of the Dolphin emulator don't give a big advantage anymore, if I was going to be serious at running the game again, I wanted to do it on original hardware. So I got back to practicing, and eventually on September 19th, 2020, I managed to lower my personal best all the way down to 28 minutes and 10 seconds, now 30 seconds off of Crix's world record. But at this point, I had already shown I had the potential to beat it if I managed to hit every trick and moved like I did in practice. But in a game with this many difficult tricks and such a small margin for error, this was much easier said than done. Just under a month later, I started getting runs with high potential. Crix still generally had a bit better movement than me, and he had an especially good start compared to mine. So starting off this run, I was already 8 seconds behind Crix out of Trollhole, even though I cut out the setup for Trollhole completely. But that was within expectations. Although my start was worse, I had a couple tricks up my sleeve to try to catch up. On Overhill and Underhill, I closely matched Crix's time, showing that when I played my best, I wouldn't fall behind. Then in Riddles in the Dark, I managed to hit the super tricky web skip, which Crix chose not to do in his run. But my Riddles in the Dark wasn't perfect, so I only managed to get as close as 4 seconds behind Crix. But Flies and Spiders is where I could close the gap. Back before I quit in 2015, I had found a time-saving slope boost here, but nobody had used it so far because of its difficulty, with Crix going as far as to name it Stupid Boost. However, I was confident in it, and when I got there, I hit the boost cleanly. Unfortunately, during the next section where you parkour over raising pillars, I slipped off and couldn't climb back up before the pillar lowered again, costing a whole 10 potential seconds. But because Crix had a somewhat sloppy Flies and Spiders himself, and I took a shorter path to the end trigger, I still managed to save 3 seconds over the world record, putting me just barely behind Crix. Then on Barrels Out of Bond, which could potentially cost me time because of how long and how movement heavy the level is, I managed to keep up, even saving 9 seconds over Crix because I managed to get the clip warp on the first try. The run was now looking very doable as I was now 8 seconds ahead of Crix, and after performing a near perfect A Warm Welcome, I was now 10 seconds ahead. But that was far from a comfortable lead. Coming up was Inside Information, where I was going to use my new long jump setup that I had discovered together with my friend Shockster. This was a lot easier than the old way, but definitely still tricky. I thought I missed. I thought I pressed it too late, holy shit, dude. I hit it, but my setup was slower than first trying the old way. So after inside information, I was now only 5 seconds ahead of Crix's world record. I was now up against Crix's amazing endgame, one where Crix had pulled all the stops, and I only had a small 5-second lead. I could not afford any mistakes.
Oh, I was so scared I fucked up when I ended up on the left shoulder, dude. Oh fuck, I boosted right into the Arkenstone? Okay, all or nothing. Yes. Nice. Jesus Christ, I can still choke this. Shit. I haven't been that nervous in a long time.
I had finally done it. I took the world record with a new time of 27 minutes and 35 seconds, a 6-second improvement, breaking Crix's 4-year streak of holding the world record, and reclaiming my title after quitting 5 years ago as Irule. I was back, better than ever. But at some points, I wasn't sure if I could beat Crix, especially when I looked at the earlier levels in the run. There was so much I had to catch up on, but by cutting out a lot of setups, implementing every tough strategy I knew, and practicing many hours of individual level runs, I was back on the throne, and this time, I wasn't planning on giving it up. During my years of absence, so much of the speedrun had evolved, and so much of the community had changed. It was no longer a little group of friends that ran on GameCube in 2014. We were now a full-fledged community with people all over the world, doing what we love. Yet our community still wasn't done growing. Our story is far from done. After all, we've only covered the GameCube version of The Hobbit, but there was a version that could potentially be pushed even further. I urge you to stick around, and listen as we step back in time to tell the tale of the history of the Hobbit speedruns on PC.
The game was one of my favorites growing up, so I was curious if there were any speedrunning tricks for it.
Eventually, I decided to get back into it, but this time on PC because it seemed like such a simple yet fun run.
Whether it was community or competition I was looking for, maybe satisfying a childhood curiosity of what lies beyond the bounds of the game.
At the start of this video, I mentioned that The Hobbit was released on 4 different platforms: GameCube, PlayStation 2, Xbox, and PC. The console versions of The Hobbit were all almost the same, with GameCube just being a bit faster when load times are not counted. But the PC version of The Hobbit actually has some major differences. They were mainly control differences that a lot would argue made for a worse experience for a playthrough. On PC, the camera is locked to be almost always directly behind Bilbo, while you're only able to move in 4 directions with the WASD keys. This was a huge contrast to the free camera on consoles, and their 360-degree joystick inputs. Bilbo's walking speed was also lowered on PC. Many would argue the PC version feels less intuitive and doesn't lend itself well to platforming, so it's probably no surprise that the console versions, mainly GameCube, had always seen significantly more attention than the PC version. But that didn't stay true forever. We're going back to 2015, when I was known as Irule and was just about to quit, and Crix wasn't doing speedruns on console yet, because at this time, Crix was the first to give the PC version of The Hobbit serious speedrunning attention. It was on September 4th, 2015, that Crix had fully completed a route for PC, and posted an edited together run to prove his concept. In this concept, Crix showed a route that clocked in at almost exactly 34 minutes. The first, somewhat sloppy proof of concept was already 4 minutes faster than the GameCube world record at this time. But how does that make sense when the PC version just seemed like a worse port of consoles? The biggest thing was that PC load times were ridiculously fast, easily saving over 5 minutes. But even without counting loads, The first PC route was already super close to the GameCube route that had been optimized for years. The reason for this was that PC had insane clipping mechanics. On PC, you could practically clip through any wall you could see, in rare cases, even phasing through them so quickly it felt like they weren't even there. This was probably a development oversight when they translated the joystick movement into a keyboard and mouse system, and the speedrun could absolutely abuse it. In Krix's first route of the PC version, he already showed one of these clips early on in Roast Mutton, wedging himself between two rocks and popping out right where the out-of-bounds slope boost started. Then on Overhill and Underhill, Krix's brother had found a clip that could skip the first gear collecting section by wedging himself between a pillar and the wall. And in the Gathering of the Clouds, Krix quite literally just jumped through a wall and went around the outside out-of-bounds edges to get to the Arkenstone. Both the Roast Mutton and Gathering of the Clouds clips were found by Samwise from the Minimums community. The rest of the levels all played out very similar to how GameCube did them. Most things that could be done on GameCube also translated to PC, yet PC had potential for exclusive skips. However awkward and counterintuitive the PC controls may seem, it looked like there was actually potential for a unique speedrun on this platform. And soon after posting this proof of concept, Krix completed a real speedrun of the PC version, the first of its kind, with a time of 33 minutes and 39 seconds. But it was right after this that Krix decided to switch to GameCube to join in on the existing competition. And although PC was still just an afterthought for almost all of the Hobbit community, there was one person who would show its potential. This was Schneider, a new German speedrunner, and he started setting record after record on PC. Starting off with a 32:47 on July 20th, 2016, Schneider beat Krix by almost a minute using the exact same route. Impressive. Yet Schneider was alone and running a relatively unexplored platform. But that didn't stop him. A little over a month later, Schneider set a time of 30 minutes and 33 seconds, improving the record by over 2 minutes. He had adopted some of the new GameCube strategies that were found around this time, and translated them to PC ones. Most notably, the fastest troll hole skip, and he combined it with much better execution than his last run. And just 7 days later, on August 31st, Schneider improved the PC record down to 29 minutes and 43 seconds, just purely off of better execution. But it was then, presumably because of the lack of competition, that Schneider also moved to playing GameCube. But fast forward to February 14th in 2018. It was around this time that speedruns on GameCube had started making massive leaps thanks to MDPie's efforts. And now it was actually Krix who revisited PC. By researching together with MDPie, Krix was now able to do inside information skip as well as a warm welcome skip on the PC version, and he managed to pull it off in a run that got both of those tricks fairly quickly, breaking the now 1.5 year standing PC record with a 29:07, despite Krix's main focus still being on GameCube. This marked a very significant change in PC history, not necessarily because of this run, but its consequences. Only 10 days later, after a 1.5 years of PC inactivity, Schneider demolished Krix's world record, not just by a little bit, but by almost 4 minutes. Krix had awakened a beast. Using the same strategies as Krix, Schneider left no room for debate that he was undoubtedly the best on PC. This awakened beast rampaged for the coming months, and nobody dared to try to stop him. Schneider had slowly cut off almost 2 minutes off of the PC world record in these past 6 months, now putting the new world record at 22 minutes and 57 seconds on August 25th, 2018. The PC run was now almost 7 minutes faster than GameCube, although it was safe to say that the execution of the PC run still wasn't as optimized as GameCube. Still, there was no doubt in anyone's mind that the runs Schneider had been putting out were more than just impressive. Soon, about a month later, it was MDPie who would give the PC version the next push it needed. While MDPie was busy routing a warm welcome for the A button challenge, he made a major PC exclusive speedrunning discovery. Runners knew that when sliding off of an edge and going into rock throwing mode, Bilbo would enter a slow falling state that you could use to avoid fall damage. However, MDPie tried this on the out of bounds invisible platform in a warm welcome, and slowly sank into the water below. Just moments later, Bilbo was slowly drifting, with the water current pushing him. He was floating away under the invisible floor, the same invisible floor that normally had to be unloaded to hit the alternate end trigger, and as luck would have it, the water's edge was actually right above the alternate end trigger. Over the course of about 40 seconds, Bilbo slowly floated there, and when leaving rock throwing mode, he fell straight into the end trigger. This meant that you no longer had to warp out of the warehouse to unload the out of bounds invisible floor. Instead, as soon as you started a warm welcome, you could rush over to the invisible floor, force yourself into the water while in rock throwing mode, wait until the current carried you over to the end trigger, and fall into it. No thief quest needed. This saved close to 3 minutes over doing it the old PC way, and it was exclusive to PC because there you could stop your slow fall and let the current carry you, while on consoles you kept falling and drowned in the water. And of course, it was MDPie who had found such a creative skip, but there was also Silic, a new PC runner who had started at the end of 2018 and quickly lowered his personal best to a 25:45. And Silic actually managed to find a faster clip in roast mutton. He took a sharp right soon after starting the level and wedged himself between 2 boulders, and after holding a specific angle and walking into the corner for a couple seconds, he popped out on the other side, where conveniently, the alternate end trigger was only a couple slash jumps away. A super nice and easy time save that allowed you to complete roast mutton in well under 20 seconds. Even for those who doubted it, the PC version was now clearly starting to become serious business. The clunky control scheme was actually starting to feel like a great fit for speedruns. The 4-directional movement and the restricted camera actually allowed for easier and much more precise setups for skips and tricks. The PC version also allowed you to long jump from a standing still position, making tricks like Riddles in the Dark web skip trivially easy. Even long jump glitch was a non-issue on PC as long as your hardware was good enough. And the slower walking speed on PC just meant that advanced movement was even more rewarding. The PC leaderboard was even serious enough to start removing load times from the final times to make sure faster loading computers didn't have an advantage. And leading the PC charge was still Schneider, who would soon implement the new strategies found in the past 5 months. On February 20th, 2019, Schneider was doing runs against his gold splits, and made it into a warm welcome, being only 12 seconds behind those gold splits. That's only 12 seconds slower than all of his best levels combined. This added up to already being a whole 32 seconds ahead of his record, and the time save was just coming up. Schneider managed to execute the new A Warm Welcome skip quite well, only losing another 4 seconds over his gold. This put him 3 minutes and 12 seconds ahead of his record, easily on pace for the first ever sub 20 minute speedrun. And after a solid inside information, it was time for the Gathering of the Clouds, for which the route is very different from consoles and involved 2 clips to get to the Arkenstone. Schneider played quite safely on these clips and spent some extra time setting them up. He was now 3 minutes and 8 seconds ahead going into the Clouds burst. With his record having about 20 seconds of mistakes here, sub 20 was in sight. Schneider missed the timing on the early out-of-bounds slope boost, But he didn't waste his jump attack, so not a lot of time was lost. Then, Corwin's skip was fine. Schneider was a little hesitant, but who could blame him? Activating the catapult barrel early was no problem. Funnily enough, you didn't even need a slope boost for this on PC. Schneider then missed one rock throw to lower the bridge, and didn't throw a second safety rock right away, costing some extra time. Yet Schneider had no trouble going out of bounds, and reached the final barrel without issues. The new PC world record, and the first ever sub-20 Hobbit speedrun, clocked in at 19 minutes and 39 seconds, and was met with praise from the community. With the first ever sub-20 achieved, one could only wonder what else was in store for PC. Would the movement get even more optimized, or would another crazy PC exclusive skip be found? In this case, it was the latter. There was one level that had stood strong throughout the years, both on GameCube and PC. One level that, when broken, was only broken partially. One level longer than any other in the speedrun. This was how MDPie broke barrels out of Bond. On March 28th, 2019, MDPie shared a major discovery. An alternate end trigger in the form of an alternate end pedestal in barrels out of Bond. One that could be reached by clipping out of bounds right behind where the normal end pedestal is. Unlike the normal one, this alternate end pedestal didn't require any of the objectives to be completed. By clipping out of bounds and long jumping into a jump attack towards the out of bounds pedestal, you could interact with it and end barrels out of Bond early. Unfortunately though, the clip itself was very hard, and the jump wasn't much easier. This skip was actually not very appreciated by the community due to its insane difficulty and inconsistency, and no run has ever been done with it. Because 2 months later, MDPie shared an even bigger discovery. That was it. When done perfectly, you could end barrels out of Bond within 10 seconds of loading into it. This same level took close to 6 minutes on GameCube, yet it was now the fastest level in all of The Hobbit on PC. And it was once again thanks to MDPie. What you saw was another alternate end trigger, this time located right behind the gate at the start. But what had stopped the community from finding something so major, yet so close, for so long? Well, this area behind the starting gate had never been possible to access normally, as huge invisible walls surround the entire area. So it was only when developer tools were discovered that someone actually happened to check behind there and saw the alternate end trigger. Even from there, it was still going to be extremely hard to make it to the trigger, but fortunately, because of PC clipping mechanics, MDPie discovered you could slope boost up to this tree and climb the tree by very precisely getting stuck in it mid-jump. From there, you could climb its branches, which got you high enough to get over the invisible walls and reach the alternate end trigger. But this trick, especially at the time, was extremely hard and inconsistent because of how precise your position, how tight your angle, and how good your timing needed to be for the clip. This was going to require a lot of dedication to master. This time, it wasn't Schneider who would be the first to implement the new skip. Instead, it was Silic, and he was grinding. On July 5th, 2019, Silic posted 2 new personal bests with the new barrels out of Bond skip. The first was 20 minutes and 19 seconds, saving 5 whole minutes over his previous best. The next was 19 minutes and 47 seconds, achieving the second ever sub-20 Hobbit speedrun. Silic was now only 16 seconds behind Schneider, and wasn't about to stop. The very next day, on July 6th, Silic set another time. This time, it wasn't just a personal best, but a world record. Using the new barrels out of Bond skip, and by grinding over several days, Silic set a time of 19 minutes and 20 seconds, beating Schneider by 11 seconds. Schneider was once again dethroned. But Silic knew this record was far from perfect, and even stated the following in his description: free record for anyone that doesn't choke on slope boosts. Was PC finally seeing real competition? Despite being dethroned, Schneider was only more motivated. Over the span of the next few days, Schneider came back to PC speedruns and learned the new barrels out of bond skip. And only 3 days after Silic broke the record, Schneider set out on another run. And there it was. Schneider took back the world record with a 17-minute and 18-second time, beating Silic by over 2 minutes. If anyone still doubted it, they would now understand that there was no way to keep Schneider down, and he would only come back stronger every time. Schneider's run still had a number of notable mistakes, like missing the overhill and underhill ending slope boost once, and missing the slope boost for the new barrels out of bond skip twice. But as you can tell, Schneider was still far ahead of the competition, and despite that competition growing, it would still take a long time before anyone could truly threaten Schneider's position at the top. Days turn into weeks, and weeks turn into months. Going into 2020, there was still no sign of anyone who could potentially beat Schneider. Enter Geek, a French speedrunner who had started running the Hobbit on PC around the same time as the barrels out of bond skip was found. Going into 2020, Geek's personal best was just above 20 minutes as he had seemingly been running the game on and off. But it was in late February when Geek started seriously grinding to try to beat Schneider's world record. And at the end of February, Geek lowered his personal best to an 18:14, solidly putting him in second place. This was looking doable, so he continued into March where he set another 2 new personal bests, a 17:25, followed by a 17:20 when timed without loads. He was now only 2 seconds behind Schneider. A real threat had appeared, yet there were no signs of Schneider's return. And so, on April 5th, 2020, Geek continued his record attempts. Geek did it. After months of grinding, he earned the new world record of 17 minutes and 4 seconds without loads. He was equally matched with Schneider in movement, and mainly had better trick execution in this run. This made Geek the 3rd person to ever beat Schneider, but the first to do it using the same strategies, without any advantage. This record was well deserved. But even Geek himself knew that Schneider might just come back to take the record at any time. And Schneider did. Just a day after Geek's record, Schneider ruthlessly set a new time of 16 minutes and 52 seconds without loads, breaking the sub-17 mark and beating Geek in a single evening of grinding. Although Schneider had a sloppy overhill and underhill this run, he managed to catch up in Flies and Spiders, where Geek had major trouble with the first slope boost. Yet Schneider couldn't keep up with Geek's amazing barrels out of bond and fell behind again. After this, he slowly closed the gap leading up to the Cloud's burst, where Schneider finally managed to pull ahead by performing the level over 10 seconds faster than Geek did. Once again, Schneider came back and almost instantly took back the record, clearly showing he was still steps ahead. Yet with all this competition came attention, and the PC leaderboard soon grew. Could Schneider stay ahead of the existing competition, as well as the new? A couple months pass, during which there isn't much activity from the top PC runners. Yet MDPie had actually found a new and faster way of hitting the inside information end trigger by going out of bounds much earlier and jumping around the invisible wall from the side. However, this method was tricky and risky, so nobody seemed interested in implementing it yet. Come October 2020, Geek came back stronger than before and started doing record attempts again. Maybe this time he could truly pull ahead of Schneider. and on October 5th, when Geek was attempting to beat Schneider's 1652, the unthinkable happened.
Oh my, that was quick.
Ali!
Geek had just tied Schneider's world record to the second, but it was not enough. Schneider's 1652 was just 0.2 seconds faster. This was the closest anyone had ever gotten to beating a full game Hobbit world record without actually beating it. That has to be rough. But despite all odds, Geek had not yet given up. Just 9 days later, Geek managed to get an amazing run started. He was already ahead by 18 seconds out of Flies and Spiders, but the hard part was just coming up.
Losing time. Come on! How is that not it? Putain, c'est une blague!
That was a rough barrels out of bond, but Geek was still determined and continued the run, knowing he had some time to save in the Cloud's Burst.
Wow. Is this it? Yeah, it is, wow! Wait. Is that actually working?
Oh my,
oh, fuck, dude. That's like one of the most stupid things I've ever done in my life.
Geek managed to gold split his Cloud's Burst and beat the world record. The run was a roller coaster of emotions, but he had done it once again. He beat Schneider for the second time with a new world record of 16 minutes and 41 seconds. Geek was mixed on his opinions of this run, not sure if he should be disappointed that he lost his big lead early on, or happy that he broke the record. But one thing was certain, and that was that Geek had truly earned this world record once again. Geek was looking to be the only one who could take down Schneider, but historically, Schneider had never even lost the PC world record for more than 10 days. A few days passed. Eventually, 10 days passed. Was Schneider having trouble beating this new world record? Did Geek finally get the best of him? Then a month passes with no change. Until November, when for the first time ever, Schneider started streaming his practice live with commentary instead of doing it all offline. And after just a couple days, those live streams of practice turned into live streams of speedruns, and Schneider had some new tricks up his sleeve. On a run that already missed Dreamworld skip once, Schneider managed to save a whole 20 seconds over Geek's already solid overhill and underhill, partially thanks to implementing pillar skip, which is a very tight long jump into jump attack to skip waiting for the stone giants to knock the pillar down. This strategy was found by Samwise and was relatively old, but due to its difficulty, no one had implemented it before this. And so when Schneider combined pillar skip with great movement, he got a very considerable lead. Unfortunately for Schneider, his riddles in the dark wasn't nearly as well executed. Schneider fell out of bounds once and had to wait to clip warp back, and at the end of the level, Schneider struggled with a shortcut long jump up to the ring where the level ends. Now, Schneider was just under 7 seconds ahead of Geek's run. But there was more. There was a somewhat forgotten Flies and Spiders route developed by MDPie. This route had faded out of sight of the community, because no good runners had even tried it out to show its potential. But we are now at the time soon after I returned as MKarma and took back the GameCube world record, and I had just recently heard about this somewhat forgotten route and went on to prove it was worth going for on GameCube. And since this route translated to PC, Schneider decided to go for it. This new route found by MDPie featured multiple extra slope boosts to cut straight through the center of the level, making it considerably harder than the old route. So Schneider took his time on it, but even so, it was well worth it and put Schneider another 9 seconds ahead, now being 15.5 seconds ahead of Geek into barrels out of bond, where Geek had struggled with a skip.
That's pretty little time gain. Alright now. Big mouth that I have, I said in public that I have this level close to 100% now. This skip rather. And I was kind of right.
That was huge. Schneider confidently pulled ahead by close to another 20 seconds. This pace was unseen. And it didn't stop there. After clean movement in a warm welcome, Schneider was now 37 seconds ahead. Yet Schneider wasn't done implementing new stuff, and planned to be the first to implement MDPie's faster PC inside information skip.
The only thing that's kinda scary for me is this jump here. But that's good.
Schneider pulled it off, and that jump is much harder than it seems. He was now an insane 1 minute and 7 seconds ahead of Geek, going faster than anyone thought he would. And after a clean gathering of the clouds, it was looking very possible that this insane run would not just beat, but smash the world record.
Definitely gonna play it safe. Yep, that's it. Oh, my heart's pounding again. I still do enjoy this. Oh man. Alright. And that's it. It's over a minute. Over a minute time save. And it's still very beatable. Ah. I'm proud of this one.
Schneider had done it once again. He once again showed complete dominance over the PC speedrun, smashing a world record that Geek had worked so hard for, on only his 7th attempt after coming back. Schneider even went as far as to implement all these new strategies that Geek had passed up, and managed to effortlessly break the 16-minute barrier, setting a new world record of 15 minutes and 38 seconds. On November 21st, 2020. Quoting Schneider, "The ball is back in Geek's court." But unfortunately, Geek has not attempted to beat Schneider's new record since then. The rivalry between Schneider and Geek had been a sight to see, and Schneider's absolute dominance on PC was impressive. Impressive to the community, impressive to spectators, and impressive to me personally. Yet I was a proud GameCube runner, and I strongly believe that GameCube runners were still a step ahead of PC runners in optimization and movement. And despite GameCube having a longer history and more competition, I envied the attention that PC runners started getting. So I decided that I wanted to prove without a doubt that I was not only the best GameCube runner, but the best Hobbit speedrunner. Period. Problem was, I had never even touched the PC version for longer than 10 minutes. So on November 22nd, 2020, I set out to learn the PC speedrun from the ground up. I spent time practicing individual levels and finding my own setups for hard tricks. Just the next day, I felt I was ready to do my first run, and ended up with a time of 23 minutes and 43 seconds. Not very impressive. So that same day, I continued running to improve my personal best. This run just put me into 2nd place on the PC leaderboard, already ahead of Geek, and it was a huge improvement over my first run, which had major mistakes. It was clear that my GameCube skill was translating quickly, despite the many differences. I was still almost a minute behind Schneider, but considering this was only my 2nd day of learning PC, I was confident. And so on November 26th, 2020, my 4th day of learning PC, I had managed to start a run that had 8 gold splits going into the Clouds Burst. Suddenly, I was on world record pace. But even if I performed my best PC Clouds Burst ever, it would be extremely close. So I aimed to perform even better, and went for another gold split. I missed one. That sucks.
This might be close. Shit. Not sure about this movement. Never mind, it wasn't close.
And a gold split it was. I just invaded the PC version and took the world record with a 15:33. I'd been very motivated thanks to being able to see quick improvements on my PC times, and because I had a clear goal, and even to my own surprise, I was not expecting to beat Schneider in just 4 days. On one hand, I felt somewhat bad for intruding on the back and forth rivalry between Schneider and Geek, but on the other hand, I was enjoying playing PC much more than I thought I would. But Schneider doesn't stay down for very long, and I didn't beat him by much. So although I was proud of myself for achieving my goal so quickly, I was far from done. Momentum was still on my side and I wanted to pull ahead even further. The grind was on.
This is gonna be a close one. That was so bad. Alright, not the fastest, but the run's alive. GG. I beefed. They're killing him so fast!
A month after first claiming the PC world record, I managed to lower the record down to a 14:06. Shaving off almost a minute and a half across 5 new world records, and breaking the 15-minute barrier. I was on a roll, and I was really enjoying the improvement. What set me apart from PC runners before me was definitely the higher standards that came from GameCube runs. I had put a lot of effort into optimizing my PC movement, and it showed as I could pull far ahead of other runners on the longer, more movement-intense levels. On top of that, my extensive game knowledge and experience made me very confident in a lot of tricks, and I spent a lot less time on setups than most runners. I was confident, but the competition was not to be underestimated. Be it through my own influence or the sheer amount of activity that PC had suddenly gained, a lot of eyes were now on this version. While GameCube had been a slow but steady grind over many years, PC was now exploding. This attracted not only new runners, but even old titans. Enter Shockster. Shockster is a longtime great friend of mine who ran the Hobbit on GameCube back when I was known as iRoll. Even back then, he was a top 5 runner, with my biased opinion being that he could easily be higher than that. Though Shockster had quit running the game well before me, he was still around when I returned and theorized skips and setups with me. Now, this newly popularized version of the Hobbit that was arguably more comfortable to speedrun caught his eyes. Shockster had returned and was improving his PC time alongside me. On December 23rd, 2020, just a day after I set the 14:06, Shockster got a new personal best of 14:49, putting him solidly in second, as he was undoubtedly soon to become a world record contender. But something had happened behind the scenes. It would be strange to forget about a certain someone on the PC side. We weren't sure if Schneider had been planning on returning anytime soon. But when Shockster pushed Schneider into 3rd place, Schneider posted a screenshot of his splits. He had a personal best of 14:37. He was anything but inactive. As it turned out, Schneider was still 2nd place, but had no plans of posting any of the runs he had gotten before improving even more. But Schneider's offline personal best wasn't the only surprise. Another old GameCube titan was in on the PC revolution. It was Silence Erupts, the one who had been the biggest world record threat to me when I was running the game as iRoll. Silence Erupts had followed not long after Shockster and had made his big comeback on PC, and he quickly set a personal best of 16 minutes and 51 seconds, just behind Geek. PC was the breath of fresh air that the Hobbit community needed, and it was starting to see more activity in these past few months than GameCube had over many years. PC still had a lot of room for optimization. and we were enjoying it. So much so that after getting my 1406, I set out to try to find new skips and tricks on PC, and I soon saw results. On December 28th, 2020, I had made 2 new discoveries. The first was a much better ending out of bounds clip for the Gathering of the Clouds, saving roughly 8 seconds. The second was a Flies and Spiders route improvement, saving another 3 seconds. Fortunately, both were also easier to perform than the old strategies. With new strategies and momentum still on my side, I continued running into 2021. On January 1st, I started up my stream and started attempts. On my first run of the day, I got all the way into the Clouds Burst, being already 21 seconds ahead, partially thanks to my new discoveries.
Well, sheesh, just like that, I've been... just the first run I do this session? Okay.
And there it was, the first ever sub 14, standing at 13 minutes and 40 seconds. Another minute barrier broken on PC. But I was only improving this fast because Shockster had been getting runs started that threatened to beat me, and I didn't want to lose. And just over 2 weeks after this, on January 16th, 2021, Shockster set a new personal best of 13 minutes and 46 seconds, only 6 seconds behind me. The threat was imminent, so I ran as fast as I could, and just the next day, I improved the world record once again, this time down to a 13:19. This was a great run with very few mistakes, other than a missed ending slope boost in overhill and underhill, but I knew that wouldn't be enough for Shockster to give up. So I continued doing even more runs, and just 3 days later, I was moving at great pace.
Oh my god, 153? Oh my god! No, fuck! That's tough. Ooh. God damn it, just like that, huh?
If it wasn't for the barrels out of bond miss, this run would have been insane, to the point that I would have thought it to be unbeatable. But time would prove that this thought was incorrect. On this same day, Shockster completed a new run too, clocking in at 13 minutes and 20 seconds. He would not let up, and followed extremely closely. Another 3 days later, I managed to improve the world record once again, this time down to 13 minutes and 8 seconds. The run was arguably a little bit worse overall, but it had no major barrels out of bond mistakes. Surely, I'd have some room to breathe now, right? Well, Shockster had definitely not given up, but neither had the rest of the top. Battling for third place were Schneider and Silence Erupts. Silence Erupts would soon set a 14:38, being only 6 seconds behind Schneider. Shortly after, Schneider set a new personal best of 13:55, the third ever sub 14. But it wouldn't even take 2 weeks for Silence Erupts to catch back up, setting a 14:10 on February 3rd and a 13:48 on February 9th. The leaderboard had never been this stacked. During this time, I was taking a small break from speedruns, relieved that I'd pulled ahead by a small margin. But I'd ruined that margin for myself, because during this break, I made some big discoveries in the Clouds Burst. Starting off, I figured out a new ending route. By long jumping off of a barricade with a tight angle, you could just barely jump around an invisible wall and get out of bounds before doing the jump off of the catapult. This out of bounds section had a near straight path to the end of the level, so although you had to go a bit out of your way to get there, it ended up being 6 seconds faster and considerably easier. With no reason not to learn it, Shockster picked this strategy up right away and implemented it into his runs.
Holy shit, dude. Is that off of world record by 1 second?
This run was actually retimed for a 13:08.95, matching my world record to the second. If Shockster had just been 0.8 seconds faster, he would have beaten me. Shockster had improved leaps and bounds, and although he was playing with new Clouds Burst strats, I felt it was inevitable that Shockster would beat me eventually, but I wouldn't go down without a fight. These past few months have been the most active the Hobbit community might have ever been, and I wasn't about to let that end on me giving up. But I was also not done breaking the Clouds Burst. The new ending skip had actually opened some new possibilities for the section before it. There was a different route that MDPie had found about a year prior. Unfortunately, that route wasn't faster, but it featured a very creative out of bounds right after Corwin skip. This out of bounds started with tight parkour over very slim invisible walls, and if you fell down, it would cost a lot of time, or even soft lock you. So on its own, this route wasn't practical. But the new Clouds Burst ending I had found started a bit out of the way and took some extra time to go out of bounds. Then, I realized that MDPie's start on his route made a path straight to where you'd go out of bounds in the new ending, making it another 5 seconds faster, but only when the two are combined. This was a high-risk strategy, but at this level of optimization, it was worth it. These developments meant something big. A sub-13 speedrun was now looking realistic. The last-minute barrier I believed we could break. Shockster and I were both grinding runs. Shockster could get runs going with terrifying pace. Pace that I couldn't imagine myself beating. But I was more consistent and had less trouble clutching out runs in the endgame. One of us would be the first to break the 13-minute barrier.
Holy shit, it is it! Are you serious?
On February 18, 2021, I was the one who managed to break the 13-minute barrier, setting a new world record of 12 minutes and 59 seconds. Just narrowly under 13 minutes thanks to being able to pull off a great Clouds Burst. I was very happy to break this barrier, but when you consider the time saved from the new Clouds Burst strategies, this run was actually slightly worse than my previous record. But the new strategies were difficult and risky, and more importantly, they were a result of my own research. I had no reason to complain. But we can't forget about Shockster. Although his best time was still behind me, his skill was not. It was time for Shockster to realize his potential. Shockster took the world record. After being just the tiniest step behind me for so long, he pulled ahead, and he more than deserved it. His new world record, set on March 26, 2021, was 12 minutes and 50 seconds. This run was great. Shockster had taken movement to the next level with a 2 minute and 41 second overhill and underhill segment, which was even faster than my gold split at the time. Even in most levels after that, it was rare for me to match him, let alone beat him. Shockster had undeniably proven his potential. Although I was beaten, I wasn't giving up. While Shockster's potential was frightening, I still had my own strengths. Soon, I made 2 new discoveries, ones that might seem minor from a spectator perspective, but are significant for the runners themselves. First, a more consistent Dreamworld skip setup. So far, Dreamworld has always been a point of many resets. Second, I found a new barrels out of bond skip setup, which until now had been as hard as ever. Both were just minor alterations in some of the angles and positions, but they undeniably helped consistency a lot. But these discoveries would soon be overshadowed by something major. A notification appeared in the Button Challenge Discord. It was Crixium who had improved one of Samwise's strategies in Riddles in the Dark. They managed to do some really wacky stuff to get up on the minecart tracks with as few A presses as possible. And from there, they found out that there was an invisible minecart stationed at the end of one of the tracks. Just like the standard minecart, this one took you right to the end of the level. But wait a minute, that minecart seemed very fast. Couldn't we use this in speedruns? Shockster was streaming as I had this thought, so I told him about it and we got into a call. Joining us was Speedy, who was a new PC runner that we frequently chatted with. We experimented with this invisible minecart and soon theorized that this could indeed be considerably faster for speedruns. But there was one huge hurdle. When using the invisible minecart, the other decorative minecarts going around the track would keep moving. This made them crash into us most of the time, which instantly killed Bilbo before we could even get close to the end. We needed to make it consistent, so we looked around and realized that the decorative minecarts are only loaded once you jump down through the load trigger in the mine shaft. We then saw that these minecarts were on a cycle after they loaded, so we made a spreadsheet and tried all kinds of different timings and movement to see if the cycle aligned. Eventually we noticed a strange interaction where if you slashed your sword while on the minecart, it could affect how the other minecarts moved, so we tried various slash timings and amounts as well. After a couple of hours of testing, we had found the perfect sweet spot. You needed to get to the invisible minecart roughly 23 seconds after loading in the minecart section. Then you had to make sure not to perform any slashes in the minecart until making it to the first turning sign, from where you had to keep slashing your sword constantly or you would get rear-ended by the minecart behind you. If you did it just right, you would narrowly avoid bumping into the minecart in front of you and save around 11 seconds over the old way. This was a tricky but huge find when PC was already this optimized, and the skip is somewhat symbolic, bringing together parts of the GameCube, PC, and challenge community, with many people contributing a part of it. Neither Shockster nor I could rest easy while there were new setups and a new skip to work with. Maybe if Shockster struggled to get runs going, then I could pull ahead again. But Shockster showed no signs of weakness. Just a day after the discovery of the new Riddles in the Dark skip, Shockster set a new world record of 12 minutes and 45 seconds. And he wasn't done. 3 days later, on April 10th, he got a 12:37, which was even better executed than his 12:50 had been. And it seemed like Shockster could still go faster, but I hadn't lost hope. I was still doing attempts, and just like how Shockster had gotten so close to beating me when I was still ahead, I managed to set a time that was just barely behind Shockster. On April 15th, I got a 12:38, just a second behind Shockster. If my Cloudsburst had just been a little better, I could have taken back the world record. But that was a pointless thought, because Shockster had still not shown his full potential. On April 20th, 2021, Shockster set a new world record of 12 minutes and 19 seconds, completely leaving the competition in the dust and undoubtedly proving that he is the best on PC. His movement, execution, and even his consistency were just so far ahead. With such an achievement, Shockster took a well-deserved break. Meanwhile, I went to translate some of the new PC strategies to GameCube, which had been overshadowed by all of the PC activity. Pillar Skip, the new Riddles in the Dark, and Flies and Spiders were all things that could realistically be done on consoles too. And on May 5th, 2021, I managed to improve the GameCube world record down to 27 minutes and 13 seconds, a sizable 22-second improvement. With PC and GameCube now more optimized than ever before, this would be the end to this story. Or so I thought, but Shockster had different plans. He came back to PC and set his sight on what was previously thought to be impossible. Shockster wanted to break the 12-minute barrier, yet it was believed to be impossible for a reason. But Shockster put the game on another level. He was improving his movement, fitting in more long jumps at the smallest height changes. He was taking tighter turns even where the risk was huge. If anyone was going to achieve the impossible, it would be him. On June 28th, 2021, Shockster set a new world record of 12 minutes and 18 seconds. A 1 second improvement, but he hadn't been back for long yet. Soon after that, Shockster and I worked together for a new first clip for the Gathering of the Clouds, clipping through the wall left of the door and doing a tight long jump into jump attack to reach the hallway, taking a just ever so slightly shorter path. This new clip was more consistent than the old way, although it required more practice, but when going for a sub 12, even a small second like this could make the difference. Then 5 days later, Shockster improved the world record to 12 minutes and 14 seconds. A sizable improvement and an insane run, but still a long shot from sub 12. Could he really achieve it? What needed to be done? In his 12:14, Shockster had a 2 minute and 41 second overhill and underhill with some small mistakes. This level is extremely movement heavy, and playing perfectly versus playing good made a huge difference. At his best, Shockster could save 4 seconds here. Flies and Spiders was similar. When done perfectly, Shockster could still save another 3 seconds. That left another 7 seconds to cut for a sub 12. But up until the end, Shockster's run was extremely solid. Except for the Cloud's Burst, where Shockster had some trouble setting up the first slope boost and didn't hit the Corwin trigger the way he wanted to. Compared to his best segment, this added up to just over 7 seconds of time save. A sub 12 was technically possible, but it would require him to match his best segments on some of the most intense stages in the run. But the thought of a sub 12 alone was exciting, and Shockster shifted gears into a full focus grind, doing runs offline instead of streaming them and continuing to save every frame possible. On July 15th, 2021, Shockster showed that the impossible was possible. A 12 minute and 2 second world record. A massive improvement. An insane run and so close to breaking the 12 minute barrier. If he had matched his best segments on any of the longer levels in the game, it could have been it. While Shockster was already leagues ahead of the competition, he would not stop improving, and stated, "I did not expect to absolutely smash my last PB, but the stars definitely aligned for this one. This run removed any doubt in my mind about the reality of breaking the 12 minute barrier. It will happen. I won't stop until it's broken." And stop, he did not. But his sub 12 hadn't become any easier. His world record was just executed insanely well. To do that again and to do even better, as much as I believed in Shockster's potential, it seemed extremely hard. But Shockster wasn't necessarily alone. We, as a community, had been morally supporting Shockster's journey, and I personally spent a lot of time labbing together with Shockster to try to save every frame we could. Together, we had stumbled onto one place we could optimize to help him break the impossible barrier. It was the overhill and underhill door clip, an old PC strategy where you skip one of the gear collection sections by using the pillar to clip through the closed door. This clip required exact angles and numerous steps, and we had already optimized it significantly over our time playing PC. Different angles, special jump timings, strafes, light directional presses. We tried everything to optimize this clip. And finally, Shockster came with the idea to use crouched strafes against the pillar. We soon found a tricky way to save just under a second on this clip by implementing the crouch strafes. Another crack formed in the barrier. Yet a few days later, I revisited this clip and tried something new. When crouching and very quickly tapping the left or right direction, Bilbo will actually move in the opposite direction. This turned out to have a weird interaction with the pillar where at the right angle and when spamming the left inverted crouch strafe, you would quickly wiggle through the pillar without needing to spam jumps like before. I dubbed this method Wiggle Clip, and it saved another second over our previous optimization, and this method was easier to perform than any previous one. All cards were on the table. We knew what had to be done, and we knew someone who could do it. Our eyes were on Shockster as he continued his quest to break the 12-minute barrier, his quest to make the impossible possible. That's the end of our story. Shockster remains on the top of the PC leaderboard with the only sub 12 time, while I still hold the GameCube world record. Both platforms now completely have their own identities. The PC run requires extremely good movement and minimal setup time to be competitive, while the route on console still features so many hard tricks that good trick execution brings you very far. Since then, Shockster had made some attempts to beat his PC world record again, some that had high potential. But finally, he decided to step back from PC, and then went back and forth on doing GameCube attempts, getting all the way up to 4th place, and getting close to taking 3rd. And looking back at Crixium, he has very occasionally been running GameCube any% NMG, but he's felt burned out of that category for a while and hasn't been active for these past few months. But if he returns, I know that he will return stronger than ever before. Meanwhile, Schneider also hasn't shown much activity in these past few months. Although he said he hasn't been interested in speedrunning for a while, who knows when he'll make another grand return. As for me, I'd still like to improve my PC time to at the very least close in on Shockster, and I'd also like to break the 27-minute barrier on GameCube. But my main focus has been drifting to discoveries and community content. And finally, for the speedrun itself, PC almost seems to have been figured out, with very little room for improvement. Some new and interesting battles have been happening on the PC leaderboard, with Slipboy, Speedy, and Silum all duking it out over 5th place. Meanwhile, GameCube still has some more room for improvement, but the GameCube community hasn't been that active recently. Although Cairo, a newer runner, has put in a lot of work and held 5th place until Shockster returned to GameCube. If you made it this far, thank you so much. It means a lot to me. This project has been way bigger than I first anticipated, and I'm anxious over a lot of parts. I know this video is just way too long, but there was so much I wanted to share, so much I hoped for you to listen to, and there's still more I wanted to add. I worry that the video length will turn a lot of people away. It's been really tough putting in more and more effort while worrying that it will make the video less and less appealing. I've worked on this project for countless hours over the past 7 months, while having no prior experience writing scripts or making documentaries. I've had some severe mental dips and I'm still worried that this video will completely flop. But if you're here and you hear this, then I know it won't have been for nothing. A huge thank you to you, to all of the Hobbit community, to Crixium and MDPie who have been super helpful in putting together the timeline, to DWhatever who gave me advice, feedback, and moral support, to SimpleFlips, who is willing to record voice lines and whose words of encouragement meant the world to me. There's too many people to thank and not enough words to express it. You know who you are. Thank you. But most of all, I need to thank Shockster. He encouraged me, helped me record background footage, reviewed and gave feedback, recorded voice lines, and much more. Without him, this would have never happened. There's so much more I want to say, but this has gone on too long already. This was the history of the Hobbit speedruns, but our story will continue.